There were one or two who were way out there, as in they disappeared because what they were doing was actually probably just inappropriate.
That's super interesting, but probably not for the reasons that you think.
I'm talking hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pounds of instructions in complex cases. They came from people approaching me through LinkedIn.
Would you like to tell that story?
I clicked on it and it was William P. at Harney's, and I was like, who is this?
And I was like, what? It's like watching a soap opera or something. It's like, whoa, you're not a barrister anymore?
I thought you were going to say watching a car crash. I'll tell you a secret now, something I've not told anybody, not on any podcast I've been on.
Today, I sit down with Sahar Farooqi, a well-known face on LinkedIn. He spent 15 years as a barrister before working for Harney's as transformation officer. Then he started his own business. But I'll let him tell you how he got there. In this episode, Sahar tells the story behind the boldest decisions of his career, leaving the bar to step into a world most lawyers still tiptoe around: transformation. But this isn't a conversation about innovation, it's a conversation about reinvention. We go into way more than Sahar's intriguing journey in law. We talk about why junior lawyers are entering the most high-stakes decade the profession has ever seen, how LinkedIn flipped the direction of his career, and the new rules of success in a legal world where talent and technology are now in a race, and only those who adapt will win. So, Sahar, I'm so excited to have this conversation with you because, you don't know this, but when I first started my podcast 2 years ago, you were one of the first people that I was like, I want to speak to this guy. And Jono said to me, oh, my dream person that you would interview would be Sahar. And now 2 years later, we're having the conversation.
Well, I'm very flattered. Very, very flattered.
I think the reason was because I saw you on LinkedIn. I saw that I believe you were a barrister at the time. 2 years ago, would you have been a barrister?
Yeah, I would have been, yep.
Yeah. And I was like, I was just super intrigued, very, very intrigued about you. I don't know why. There was just something I want to speak to this guy.
Had we not met then, though?
No.
No.
No. I think we met like maybe 6 months later or something like this.
At Legal Tech Talk?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, very interesting. So at what point did you start posting on LinkedIn then? And why did you start posting on LinkedIn?
So I started posting on LinkedIn probably, I think 2016, 2017 kind of time. The genesis for that was actually that I'd been using a platform at work called Yammer, which is now called Viva Engage. It's basically like a closed LinkedIn within organizations. And I had found that was quite useful in terms of getting to know people across the firm, across the business. And I thought, well, I'll just take this onto LinkedIn. What I actually found when I started posting initially was that I wasn't getting much traction at all, just because I didn't really know how to write content for global dissemination or a global audience. So it took me some time to find my feet, to look at what other people were doing. And ultimately, I realized the more personable you are, the more personal you are, the more relatable you become, the more people want to engage. So it's much less talking about, oh, I did this case in court today, which is sometimes fraught with its own problems anyway, because your client doesn't want to read about what happened in court online necessarily. These are things that I've experienced. These are things that I've overcome. These are challenges that I've faced. These are successes that I've had, but doing so in an accessible sort of human way.
Yeah, I think that is the key. And I think what was unique about you at the time and still is the fact that, when I was looking on LinkedIn, which was quite late on, there was no other kind of barristers talking about their day to day. And it was like, wow, this is so interesting. This is like an insight into the world of a barrister, which is super interesting for me as somebody working in the legal industry but doesn't really deal with barristers. Yeah, I don't know of anyone else who was talking about that at the time, you know?
There were definitely a few people out there, and when I say out there, I mean there were one or two who were way out there, as in they disappeared because what they were doing was actually probably just inappropriate. Um, but the bar has historically suffered from that kind of inaccessibility. It still does in some ways, and it's shrouded in mystery and myth. And so there's no doubt that we were, myself and my colleagues in this kind of in-house model, we were doing something a bit different anyway. And so we were able to talk about things a bit differently. And the bar itself was changing. So there was room for a narrative to talk about, particularly failure, to talk about the problems that are systemic within the profession, the problems of how difficult it is to get pupillage, what that process is like, what it does to people, how much money they spend on it, all things that for a audience of aspiring barristers in particular, who I spent a lot of time supporting when I first started on LinkedIn, for them it was huge to get that content. I was able to create, it's still one of the largest pupillage resources on LinkedIn, to consolidate a lot of information that other barristers were putting out there just to help people on their journey. So I do get that it wasn't necessarily going on at the time. I think it was probably going on other platforms like Twitter, and the secret barrister, who I would in no way compare my influence to, that had really lifted the lid on a lot of things as well. So there was room. It was probably just the right moment, I think, for that sort of discourse.
Definitely. And I think, if I remember rightly from a post that you did, I believe, about how you ended up getting the role at Harney's, LinkedIn played quite an important role in that. Would you like to tell that story?
Yeah, well, actually, LinkedIn has played a massive part in my life, not just that Harney's journey. So many of the things that have happened to me would never have happened without LinkedIn. I mean, client relationships that I forged whilst I was in law firms, and I'm talking hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pounds of instructions in complex cases, they came from people approaching me through LinkedIn. The opportunity to move between firms, that all came from LinkedIn. And yeah, ultimately Harney's was an interesting one because I periodically post different things. Your content has to vary, right? Sometimes they're serious, sometimes they're reflective, sometimes they're just a joke. And I wrote a joke post um, about things lawyers say versus what they mean. And somebody commented on this, and I didn't recognize the name or the organization. I clicked on it, and it was William Peake at Harney's, and I was like, who is this? What is this place? It was very fortunate because I sent him a DM on the basis that I was at that point looking for a role in transformation, a role in change. And my frustration was that a lot of law firms I was speaking to still wanted me to be a fee earning partner alongside doing some of those things. And it landed for him, unbeknownst to me, in his inbox at a time where Harneys were going through significant change. They were selling their fiduciary business, and they were gearing up for the next iteration of what they were going to look like. I mean, he's more obsessed with LinkedIn than I am, but he replied very quickly, and we ended up meeting up and having breakfast to discuss this idea, and it just kept going and going and going. And then we created the role together, the transformation officer role at Harney's, one which he really really backed from the outset.
That's super interesting, but probably not for the reasons that you think. So I'm now thinking from the mindset of perhaps a junior lawyer or perhaps somebody who's working in law who wants to start their own business. somebody who wants to do more, I'm looking at you hearing this story thinking, that's really incredible that you reached out, that you had the kind of like the guts to do that and to say, you know what, I want to do this. I want to help with transformation. How can we make it work type of thing? And I'm just wondering if you have any kind of lessons that you learned from that experience or any reflections that would help a listener who is potentially wanting to make a bold, because I would call that a bold move, make a bold move like that, and how they could go about doing it, because it's amazing.
Well, I think the expression the kids use these days is you just got to shoot your shot, and that that's what it comes down to, isn't it? It's just sending the message and seeing if you get a reply. For every DM that I have sent, I've probably got a reply rate of 1 in 10, but I've asked the question every time. I'm not to say I'm constantly asking people for jobs. I mean, I've asked whatever it is about wanting to connect or wanting to discuss something. And that's really important because fine, 9 out of 10 people don't reply, but 1 in 10 do, and you can take that forward and develop it. If you just sit there and think, I'm going to have paralysis over whether or not I should send this, then there is a 100% chance you will fail. If you send it, then see what happens. And beyond that, it's not really, I mean, that's not really kind of massively insightful advice, but it's the truth. And it's therefore something that everybody can do. Just don't hesitate, send the DM and see if you get a reply, and then you can take the conversation from there. As to how you structure the DM, that's also, um, a slightly different question. And that depends on who you're addressing. It depends on your own personal level of experience. When I sent Will that DM, I had looked at his profile and I made the determination this is someone who's running a global organization who's very busy. And so I applied the logic that if my message is more than one screen of iPhone text, he's not going to get to it. So I kept it very, very short. And for very busy people, I think that's a good yardstick you can use, for example.
I agree with you. I think also, obviously, I don't know what was contained in that message, but I imagine that you explained the value that you could bring to the organization. And I think a lot of people go wrong. So many people send me messages, and probably you're the same, but worse, where they're like, oh, can I have 10 minutes of your time? Can I have this? Can I have this? And they're asking to take. And it's like, I barely have 10 minutes to have a cup of tea to myself, let alone talk to a random stranger that I have no idea what are you bringing to the table? Do you just want to take from me? And I think this is where a lot of people go wrong. So if somebody sends you a message and it's like, actually, I have value to bring to you, I think it's probably a breath of fresh air for people.
That's true. I'll tell you a secret now, something I've not told anybody, not on any podcast I've been on, not something I think I've even mentioned to my friends, but that original message that I sent to Will Peak, in that I was pitching a chief of staff role. And when I looked back on it shortly after joining, I was going to post a screenshot of part of the message and I didn't because I realized I'd misspelled chief of staff.
Oh no.
Cheap, the word chief was misspelled. And, you know, that doesn't escape someone like him. I'm sure he did notice at the time, but in the context of everything else that I was saying, he was still willing to have a conversation. So, I mean, that's an absolutely terrible thing to have done, and it makes me cringe unbelievably, given the fact that I constantly say, especially to aspiring barristers, you cannot afford spelling errors in your applications. It's perverse that I did that, but it happened.
But Will Peak is nice enough to be like the type of person who would not bring attention to that or probably would never ever mention it again, even if he noticed.
Oh no, he has brought that to my attention at other points, but not at the time that it mattered.
Well, yeah, yeah, he loves a bit of banter,
Yeah.
after the occasion. Oh, that's so funny, that's hilarious. He's like, "Yeah, you can't have that role because you can't spell it."
Yeah. That's what actually
Fine,
exactly what happened. Yeah. He was like,
we'll
let's
find
let's let's try let's try something else. Can you spell transformation?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's so funny.
That was his test, a much harder word.
Yeah. We'll try you on this one, and then if you make it, you pass the test, like, you're in.
Yeah. But you never know. I mean, he wasn't in the market for the role that we created. He recognized through the conversations that we were having that actually they needed something like that in that moment in time. People said to me at the time when I was talking to sort of mentors and people that I've worked with, senior people I've worked with over the years about the type of role that I was looking for after moving away from being a practicing barrister, moving away from being a law firm partner. People said to me, you're the type of person who somebody will try to create a role around, but you have to find the organization where they are looking for your skill set. And that proved to be true, certainly in that case.
For sure. And I think obviously you built that for yourself. You were posting on LinkedIn, you were showcasing what you were doing. And if you hadn't been publicly talking about the achievements and the skills that you learned and the projects you were working on, then he would have zero context and he'd be like, who is this guy who can't spell the word chief and wants to work for me? Like, what,
Yeah. Yeah, I wish I hadn't told you that now. He he is he said to me before, and I'm sure he won't mind me saying this, that he learnt of some of the places where I had been working through my profile, which is an indication of the power of what one individual working within an organization can do online. You can become the face of that organization, at least to a selected or selective audience, which is, again, it's the power of the platform and how you use it.
Absolutely. Take me back. I want to hear about your barrister days and I want to hear about what you've done since then because your career progression is very interesting. I think it'll be interesting to people listening because it's not conventional. I want to hear about it. So, what have you got any stories from your barrister days?
Yeah, I've got a lot of stories, to be fair, but I mean, we'd be here all day with those. I guess it always amazes me how interested people are in my career journey, because to me, it's just kind of been like I just did stuff, just kind of fell that way. But if I go right the way back, ever since I was a kid, I wanted to be a barrister pretty much, and that was all because from a very young age I got into debating, into public speaking, and my teachers really, really encouraged that. So from the age of about 8, I was doing that regularly, and I just loved it. I loved the whole process of writing your own thoughts and speech and delivering it, and the way people respond, that kind of becomes addictive, especially if you can make them laugh just a bit. I just loved that, and I took that right the way through school into university, where I studied law. And then I decided I wanted to be a criminal barrister because practicing in crime was a passion, and it was something that was interesting and something that was cool, something that I thought was also going to make a difference. And it does. It's hugely, hugely important work. But unfortunately, you can't make any money at the criminal bar, save for a few exceptions. I couldn't really make that work in terms of the other things I wanted to do in my life. So I pivoted from practicing in crime to general civil and later on commercial work. But to do that, I also moved in house, firstly to DWF. where I helped them set up what is now their Chambers proposition. And then throughout that period, my practice changed. I ended up doing international arbitration, which was always my end game because it meant that I would get to do really exciting, high value cases in different parts of the world. And then also, it meant that I would inevitably be exposed to different elements of management and strategy as the firm was growing at the time. So I went from that into a practice that was doing pretty well. I started working for airlines and foreign governments and all sorts of really cool stuff in, places like Singapore and Hong Kong. And then myself and my business partner ended up moving to another firm where we joined as partners and then set up the proposition for them again. So for the second time in my career, I found myself doing that and building the same practice again. And I got to a stage where I was doing a case for a Korean client in Malaysia. And as we were coming to the end of that, I just sort of thought, I'm now in a situation where I either double down on my career as a barrister and I do that for the next 10, 15 years and try and become a KC if I'm good enough for that, or I use everything else that I've learned in the last 10, 12, 15 years in legal in terms of exposure to management, strategy, operations, culture, tech, all of it, and pivot in my career again. And that was one of the hardest moments of my career, the whole kind of giving up practicing as a barrister, because it becomes part of your identity. And you're used to introducing yourself that way. People feel like they know you for that, and people respect that badge much more so, I think, than necessarily even the partner badge. But that was also one that I felt it was important for me to get in the kind of law firm space. And then I go from that into the role at Harney's.
I'm very interested about the Harney's part because I guess that was the part where I kind of caught you, on LinkedIn. I saw, well, I knew you as a barrister, and then it was like, oh, you're changing direction. You're not a barrister anymore. And I was like, what? It's like watching what do you call it? Like a soap opera or something. It's like, whoa, you're not a barrister anymore.
I thought you were going to say watching a car crash.
No, 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 no. It's not that dramatic.
Well, a lot of people do feel that way when you tell them that you're going to give up being a barrister, especially people that have been around you a long time, who know how hard it is to qualify as a barrister. To them, they think you've lost your mind because it's a big deal, but it's a big deal within a bubble. And there are other ways to live your life and find career fulfillment. And I'd done it for 15 years, so it was enough.
Whoa, I didn't realize it was that long. That's a really, really long time. I feel like you've done a lot in a short space of time because you are very young.
No, that's called just for men.
Oh, so I mean, after you worked at Harney's, it was like, oh, I've got another big announcement. It's like, oh my gosh, you started your own business.
Yeah, announcement after announcement.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like, I'm delighted to announce.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, algorithm always likes that. You start a post with "I'm delighted to announce."
Yeah, yeah. Totally, totally. How did that come about?
So the way that came about was actually fairly natural because the Harney's gig was 12 months. It was a fixed term contract, which was based on some specific projects and deliverables that the firm had at the time. Will knew that was coming to an end. And I had realized by this point that firms have a need for this skill set. They have a need for change and transformation but I also understand the politics within law firms. I understand building a business case, what all of that looks like. And you get to a stage where you recognize that it's going to be much harder for law firms, in-house teams, professional services businesses to bring you in on a full-time role than it is to bring you in as a consultant. The inefficiency in that, frankly, is that sometimes they end up paying you more to consult externally than they would if you were on a full-time role. But off the back of that, and knowing that there was the need and interest in these skills, but the blocker was kind of internal business cases, it made sense for me to just launch my own consultancy that was focused on everything that I had done up to that point. And that was the real driving force behind Legal Encia. I had the concept, I had the idea, I had everything I needed. I just didn't have any idea what I was going to call it. I didn't have any idea what it would look like, but I knew the need and I knew the gap in the market. So then it was just, okay, what am I going to call this? How's that going to work?
Interesting. So, I mean, obviously, being a barrister and everything that you've done has kind of led up to this point, and you've got all these different skills, and it kind of makes sense also at the same time. You know, you went from a very innovative and I would say entrepreneurial type role at Harney's. So it makes sense that that is the next step for you. Has it been harder than you imagined starting your own business?
Yeah, it has been harder than I imagined. People did warn me. I'm fortunate to know a lot of founders, a lot of people in legal who have launched businesses of their own. People like Rob Hanna and Chrissy Wolf, people that you know, who have done a lot of the hard yards. Jody Hill being another as well, and they have given me all sorts of steers. They've given me some of their pitfalls. Doesn't mean you don't find your own, because obviously our businesses are still slightly different. So that helped. It also helped that I had this big network through LinkedIn. So I knew that I would be able to generate publicity. I knew that it wasn't going to be me launching into a vacuum where nobody would know about the business. I think on the day I launched it, within a day there was something like 500 followers on the Legal Encia page. In the beginning, we did really well with that. But I also was able to sign a few retainers early on with clients doing advisory work, which helps to assuage some of the worry that you feel about not having a consistent income anymore. And then beyond that, then I started talking about and pitching for bigger projects, and then landing my first big full scale transformation project for a law firm, which I'm now fully under the hood of and getting stuck into, alongside a pipeline of really interesting other opportunities. So it's different, and it is challenging. There are nights where you can't sleep because you've got a million things going on in your head. But I think the hardest thing I have found, and I posted about this recently actually, is I realized that I'm addicted to support functions, because working in big organizations, you've just always had somebody there, whether that's IT or HR or um, ops, whatever it is, you've got someone there to hand certain things over to. And now you are absolutely every part of your business. And that was a rude awakening. That was definitely something that, although I was aware of, actually living it is a different thing.
So I wanna touch on a case that's happened recently at the time of recording, which has changed. Well, it's caused a lot of conversation. It's created a little bit of uproar, I will say, and it's actually really it stopped me in my tracks. And I think it will be a case that changes the course of the legal industry. dare I say. I don't know, obviously, because we don't know what the future holds, but particularly in this AI era, I think it's crazy what's happened in terms of how it's changed the way we look at training for juniors and paralegals. We're talking about the Mazur case here. What is your take on what happened in the Mazur case without going into loads of legalese? And we don't want to bore people, but let's talk about the future of training paralegals, junior lawyers, the future of junior lawyers in the AI era, and what you think is going to happen. Because so many people ask me, in fact, I literally did a talk at the Peru University last night, and they asked me, oh, do you think the junior lawyer is basically dead? Because because AI is doing all their work. How do we train the future lawyer? And I was like, yeah, it's a tricky one. It's a tricky one. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so Mazur definitely massively important case at the moment. I will caveat anything I'm about to say with making sure we're clear. I'm not a barrister, and this is not legal advice. So don't don't worry about legalese because I don't know anything about that. I'm a layperson. Um, yeah, look, it's a huge decision. It's a huge judgment, and it's one that has heavily disturbed, particularly volume firms. But it's been a cultural problem in certainly the UK legal industry for a long time that unqualified lawyers, and I'm talking specifically actually at this point about paralegals. Let's park Silex for a minute because they are qualified, and the way in which they've been treated is different. And I think now they've actually even gone and got a partial reversal of the impacts of the decision anyway. Too much has been put on those people, and they've gone from being there as paralegals to support to running hundreds of files themselves. And when that happens, you aren't just stretching the limit of what they're supposed to be doing. You are really actually circumnavigating what they're supposed to be doing altogether and just deciding that this is a low cost resource who are actually quite highly skilled because they've been doing this for years. We're just going to get them to run these cases. So there is that systemic issue, which I think is at the heart of what the judgment is about. Interestingly, a lot of those firms have also been resistant to technology because they've got these armies of people and the disruption to the workflow would have been too much to really consider it. But now, for regulatory reasons and the kind of direct corollary of a decision like Mazur, these firms are now looking at AI. And even in the last week, there's been one very big national firm. I won't use their name, but they have announced a raft of redundancies at this level. And they've categorically said it's nothing to do with Mazur, which seems unlikely at best. But they have made that very clear. And I think you're going to see a bit of that because if you can't use these employees in the way that you have been, what you're left with is a workforce which is redundant for the purposes that you hired them or understood them as you forecasted your budgets. And now you look at the technology around and you think certain elements of this, especially the volume, can be managed by some of these platforms. So maybe that's the direction that we want to go in. I don't think the junior lawyer is going to die a death because ultimately you have to train humans to do this work at some point, and they have to cut their teeth on something. The reality, though, which I think is unavoidable, is that junior lawyers, as they're coming through, will be what's the expression? They'll be AI native. They will be trained in it from even before they've come to the law. So they will understand the tools, and I'm sure that those tools will start to be embedded to the point that they are taught, if not at undergraduate level, then certainly when it comes to the LPC or the bar course or whatever it is. And you will just have a generation of junior lawyers coming through who understand how to use these tools. And it will be that combination which changes the makeup of what a junior lawyer looks like. It doesn't mean they're going to die, but it means that they will be symbiotic with the tools around them.
Totally agree. And we've seen this with the collaborations of, for example, I think the latest announcement, Harvey plus a law school collaborated. I don't know whether it was Harvard Law or I don't know, but it was a law school anyway. And I was like, okay, this is interesting because this is kind of my prediction as well as the same as what you're saying, is that law students will be learning about AI and then they'll enter a law firm and they'll probably know more about AI than the lawyers, than the qualified, experienced lawyers, because they're learning about it in law school, especially with this collaboration of legal tech and universities. So it's very interesting. Things like mass redundancies, and I saw in the news as well that the Freshfields Manchester office cut some paralegals roles because they were using that investment to invest into upskilling. They didn't mention AI, but I assume they were upskilling their staff on AI and technology. So I think it's very interesting what's happening. But if they're making these mass cuts, mass redundancies, and the model of the law firm, so to speak, is kind of changing in terms of, okay, the juniors we can't use them for the same things that we were using them for before. How do juniors get experience? How do they get into a law firm? Like right now we're seeing this gap because they're not yet learning so much about AI in law school, but then we're having these redundancies, and the role is kind of changing. So what do we do in the middle?
Well, I think if you were a junior lawyer now, if I was a junior lawyer now, aspiring lawyer, and I wanted to bolster my CV, there was a time where it would matter if, as part of my CV or interview process, I was saying, I really know how to use Westlaw. I know how to use LexisNexis. And you would know that on the other end, people would get that and then think, okay, cool. So you're immediately deployable. We'll still give you some training, but you will already know this. Now, I think if I was in that situation, I would be going in having taken time. And some of the big providers out there do offer education to aspiring lawyers, junior lawyers. I would be out there in interviews saying, I speak Clio, I speak Legora, I speak Harvey. And obviously, you would be targeting firms that use those platforms, and that would impress them. And they would think, okay, great. So this is someone who understands what we're already using for our case management. They understand the AI tools that we have at our disposal, and we can train them up a little bit more, but there's more to work with from that base knowledge. I think you kind of have to do that now. And as time goes on, you will be seeing that the aspiring lawyers that come into the workforce will absolutely have done that. And eventually it will just become obscene if you haven't. It will become almost untenable because the expectation will become, well, we've got half a dozen candidates here for this one role, all of whom are familiar with these products. And this person's very impressive, but they're not. So that just rules them out.
Based on everything that's happening now with AI and like the legal industry, are you happy that you're on the other side of it?
Well, I don't know about happy so much because you adapt to different things throughout your career, and I've always adapted. I think it would have been very interesting to still sit round the partners' tables and discuss how these things are impacting the business. But I'm still participating in those conversations, which doesn't affect my bottom line. I'm just being paid to participate in those conversations. It's not what keeps me up at night, although I obviously have to help my clients define strategies for how they are going to adapt to that. So I don't know if happy is the right word. It's still very much part of my working life, and it's part of life now generally. I mean, AI doesn't stop with law firms. It's interesting.
Yeah, definitely. But I guess you're in a position now where you've gathered all this expertise, all this knowledge. You have so much information in your mind that you can apply to law firms that AI just simply can't do. So you've kind of future-proofed yourself in a way. And so you're in a good position now where well I'm kind of the same. Like I feel like I've gathered all these skills and all this knowledge and experience and stuff, and I can apply it to what I do now in terms of like marketing and stuff and building things.
Each law firm is kind of in its own state of change when it comes to the tech side. You've got firms like Simmons and Simmons who are, in my opinion, just light years ahead, having created their own solutions. And then you've got other firms that are coming to it now, and they are being pitched to by vendors, the biggest vendors, smaller vendors. It's a crowded market space, and they don't understand what they're seeing. So they're now asking at points for somebody like myself to come in and help run a procurement process, because they may have a procurement function, but this is niche to them. And being a lawyer by background and being in the legal tech space means that I can speak the language of both the firm or the in-house team and the vendor. So I can understand the pressure points that they're looking to solve. And I can also help them understand how each product will interact with their business. By pure dumb luck, I've just ended up in the right space at the right time.
Yeah, you really have. I was thinking that right at the time when all the law firms are transforming and need this assistance.
Yeah.
You're right there. It's hilarious. What do you see yourself doing in the next few years with your business? Like, where do you want to go? What are your ambitions?
At this point, it's really about just getting to a stage where we are synonymous with change, that we are very much a zeitgeist, that we have understood our brand has understood the need for change, and everyone recognizes when these issues come up, when it comes to, okay, we want to go to open an office in the Middle East. We've never done anything like that before. We need to bring someone in to advise us on that. What about what about that guy? What's that thing called? The thing that's always on LinkedIn, that that purple thing. What is it? That's the type of penetration you need of mindsets. That's kind of really my short to medium term goal, to get people thinking like that, talking like that. And then inevitably, I think in the next 12 to 24 months, to start looking at scale. So I'm fortunate to have a network that extends beyond these shores, and there's opportunities in other countries. Part of what I've been doing in the last couple of weeks is talking to people in the Middle East and talking to um, organizations in the GCC about their needs. So it's entirely possible that the business will look very different in 12 months' time. And that's kind of what I'm focused on at the moment. I don't feel like I need a 3-year plan or a 5-year plan to work towards right now. I'm building incrementally. And then I think after 12, 24 months is probably when I'll start to look at what has been achieved and what comes next.
Yeah, makes sense. And I think right now it's things are happening so fast. This year alone, there's been so much change in the legal industry. I think you have to also be flexible to adapt as well, depending on the market. And by not having like a set structured kind of restrictive plan, it's like you can actually do whatever, which I think is a good position.
Yeah, there's absolutely no point in positioning yourself as an organization that's entirely about change if you're unable to make changes yourself because your own structures are so rigid. So I have to be fluid. I have to be malleable. But in time, it will develop in a different way. People are already saying to me, you should be hiring staff. And I don't think actually that's necessary quite yet, but I can see it happening early next year.
Oh, interesting. Well, watch this space.
Yeah, actually,
Oh.
you know that. It's funny. One of the bits of when I launched Legal Encia, I poured myself into this website, which people still compliment because they say it's beautiful, and I'm very, very proud of it. But one criticism I got, one sort of feedback I got very early on, several times, was from relatively junior people, and they said, "I've been on your website, I can't find the careers section," and I thought, "Wow, like that's amazing that like you're looking at it thinking like how can I join this?" But
Yeah.
yeah, it hadn't occurred to me that anyone would think that when I was launching it. But you know, eventually, God willing, one day there will be a career section on the website because that's a natural development. It wasn't day one my primary thought.
Well, no. It never is really like, "Oh, what's my career progression process?" Like, "Let's get the first client first," you know?
Yeah, exactly.
That's so funny, but so great. I think it's amazing what you're doing. I think, as you say, it's a prime time. You're in the right place at the right time, doing the right thing. And I love that your business is all about change and transformation and being innovative because this is exactly what the industry needs right now, you know?
I'm very, very lucky, very happy to be here. And in some ways, in a unique position. I don't think that will continue to be the case because I talk to people at least once or twice a month who say to me, I'm thinking about doing what you've done." And I'm sort of conflicted there because I'm like, no, I think you're fine in your partnership role at this firm. You should really do that for the next 20 years. There's nothing to see here." Um, versus the reality, obviously, that change management is a growing space, and there is plenty of room for other people who will contribute all sorts of things. There's a lot of interest right now in this space for the baseline reason that it's just necessary.
Thank you for listening to this episode of More Than a Lawyer.